like an itch you can't scratch that keeps coming back. This is Andy Nowicki with the final Wank Session. Yes, this is the last segment that will be under the title of Wank Session. Never fear, though, I will come back for more podcasts when I have more to say under a different title. There's a couple reasons for this without getting too tedious with the explanation. One of the reasons is I'm working on a new book right now that I hope to have out in the next month or so. There's no hard deadline for that, but it's something I'm working towards. And it's taking things in a slightly different direction. So in addition to promoting my autobiography slash memoir slash manifesto, Confessions of a Would-Be Wanker, again by Andy Nowicki, that is me. I'm also going to be promoting that book and using these podcasts as an extended advertisement, more or less. Hopefully one that's not too gratingly self-promoting or too grating in its self-promotion, because self-promotion is the name of the game, baby, unfortunately. You don't get anywhere in this world unless you are willing to promote yourself. And hopefully you're worth it. But you just gotta promote yourself and believe that you're worth it. And that's where faith comes in. And I have faith sometimes that I'm worth it, and other times not so much faith that I'm worth it. But all the time I go right ahead with the promotion, shamelessly, but hopefully not tediously. And I think I'm right on the brink of getting tedious right now, so let me move on. So that's one reason, because I've got a new book coming out. The title is not yet completely decided on. I haven't unveiled it yet, but I want to take things in a slightly different direction with that. Also, with these wank sessions and these references to my book, Confessions of a Would-Be Wanker, I am aware that the wank imagery, that the wank metaphor has been used quite a bit. I won't say that I've wanked to death or anything like that, but I have used it a lot. And the distinction between being a wanker and being a fucker is something I have come back to again and again and again. Now, again, these are metaphors. These are not references to actual wanking. And that's something that I think a lot of you people just, you hear about wanking all the time, and you hear wank used in a metaphorical way, and still you get this titter about it. And it sort of becomes like Andy Nowicki is the wanking guy. And I know I've got myself to blame for this in some ways, because I've used this metaphor advisedly, but and pointedly and intentionally. But really, come on, you guys. I mean, most of you are bright. Most of you know what's what. You've been to a few English classes. You've read some literature. You understand how metaphors are supposed to function, right? When I talk about be a wanker, not a fucker, I'm speaking metaphorically about wanking and fucking. Okay? Metaphorically. And this actually leads into the topic that I wanted to discuss today, which is sex education. Now, most of us, if you're my age or younger, which I think is most of the people listening to this podcast, there may be a few people who are older than me, but I think I'm on the older edge of the alternative right scene. I'm 44, solidly in the Gen X demographic. And so most of us have grown up, again, as I've talked about many times before, in the wake of the monstrous sexual revolution, which is still, of course, convulsing the West and causing untold havoc in many, many ways. Right now we're in the gay phase of the sexual revolution. The last 5, 7, 10 years, it's been all about gay, 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 gay all the time. That's the latest, again, wave, if you will, of this oncoming tide that we've got. One thing coming after another, after another, buffeting us and eroding our values one by one, little by little, and leaving us with just a battered husk of what used to be civilization. Sorry to mix metaphors there, but just thinking on the fly here. So if you grew up in the wake of the sexual revolution, which most of us did, again, there may be a few baby boomers listening in, and we welcome all kinds, even baby boomers. So nothing necessarily against y'all, except y'all just about destroyed the world. But nothing personal. Anyway, in the wake of the sexual revolution, one of the results was the passing of legislation that public schools had to have sex ed. We had to learn about sex in school, right? And there was some resistance to this in some pockets, and there still is, I think, in some places. But generally speaking, it swept through the public schools. And I remember being in 5th grade or 6th grade, and we had a day where we were all taken to Fernbank Science Center, which is in the metro Atlanta area. And they have a lot of things about science. Of course, they have a telescope, and you can look at planets and stuff like that, or they did back then. I'm not sure if it's different now. And they had stuff about dinosaurs too, and so there was cool science stuff, but there was also gross, embarrassing science stuff, i.e. human biology, i.e. human sexuality, i.e. when the sperm meets the egg, etc. So that's what we were taken for, was just this, to be immersed in sex. Here's what sex is. And we had this, they took all of us kids there. Of course, our parents had to sign a consent form, but just about everybody did. So we all went to this room, and there was this sassy black lady, and we were all a bunch of white kids from suburban Atlanta. But they brought in this lady, and she was just all like, "Ooh, child, here's what this is, and here's what that is," and she was, again, very, very frank, and we were all extremely mortified. We didn't want to see this. We didn't want to hear this. There was one kid who put his head down on his desk because he was so embarrassed. I remember this very, very plainly. And at this point, the principal of our school went over and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Nope, you got to look," or indicated that he can't put his head down on his desk. It's very important that he see everything. And so it was kind of almost shock treatment for us kids. And I couldn't help but think that this lady, really enjoyed scandalizing this group of young white kids. I don't know, there wasn't necessarily a racial angle to it, but it was striking, the fact that she was black and we were all white, and that she was very sassy and open, and in that certain style that certain black ladies tend to have, and that most of us were very shy and very, again, scandalized and mortified, and we didn't want this, but by God, they were going to pour it in our ears and pour it down our throats, and we were going to learn about it. So that was sex ed. That was my memory of sex ed, being taken on this one day and just given this immersion. And I don't really even remember very much about what we learned. I think we saw some film. I don't remember. When I say I don't remember what we learned, I don't remember the exact wording of things. I just remember how it made me feel, and how I think I wasn't alone. I think there was a lot of a general feeling of being ill at ease and of not wanting to be there and not wanting to hear this, but of being forced to, much like Alex in A Clockwork Orange after he's been taken to be rehabilitated, and his eyes are held open as he's forced to watch these violent movies in order to train him to be a proper citizen and not commit violence. In the same way, we were being strapped down, metaphorically strapped down, not literally. I don't want to be over dramatic here, but we were being taken to this room and forced to watch, forced to listen, as our innocence was shredded by this lady who could just talk very easily and forcefully and aggressively about all these things that were so embarrassing to hear from the lips of any adult. Of course, these were things that we muttered about and tittered about with one another at school, but it was something else again just to be, confronted in this manner. And this really got me to thinking when I was recalling all of this. By the way, those of you who are interested, I discussed this experience in my story, Autobiography of a Violent Soul, which is taken from The Doctor and the Heretic and Other Stories, in case anyone is interested. I recount this experience in a bit more detail. It's a fictional story, but I pretty much take this experience as it actually happened and discuss it in more detail there. But reflecting on this experience got me to think about how the sexual revolution has been mostly about immodesty, or not mostly, but largely about immodesty. It's been about, these sexual liberals, these people who want to destroy, quote, repression. Repression is the bogeyman that they have, and they want to obliterate it. And the way that they do this is to just be really open and frank, almost clinical, and then they just spew it everywhere, rhetorically, without remorse. It's on TV, it's in books, it's in sex ed classes. You can't get away from it. And they drill it into you. And the whole idea, it seems, is, although they wouldn't see it this way, but the whole idea from the point of view of the traditionalist is to shred innocence. Now, innocence is something that we all have to, a loss of innocence is something we all have to deal with anyway, in one form or another in our lives. And, it's an issue that must be confronted by all of us at some point or other. But it used to be that society and societal norms, civilizational norms, were about preserving innocence for as long as possible. And then when innocence is lost, about when it has to be lost, civilizational mores were about glossing over this loss of innocence, or trying to make it as unpainful as possible, and trying to again preserve as much innocence as possible and safeguard innocence as long as possible. Well, when the sexual revolution came around, obviously things got inverted, and now they're teaching second graders how to put on a condom and so forth. And it seems to me that's a big part of it, is just the throwing the immodesty in your face. So what I'm trying to do here, and with discussing things very frankly in the way that I do, and what I try to do in a larger sense in what I write, the things that I write, and the articles that I write, the books that I write, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is I'm trying to confront this force or this tendency, and to fight it on its own terms. So I'm very frank about these things, and people who think that I'm a prude, obviously I can't be that much of a prude if I use this kind of terminology that makes you all titter and say, "Oh, ooh, my," in your own kind of way. No, the point is to use this terminology and to be frank in the interest of tradition, because that's the kind of defense that sexual traditionalism, moral traditionalism needs. It needs a frank kind of defense. And the sex has been thrown in our faces, and we've been forced to watch as our innocence is taken away. And now, in order to fight fire with fire, we've got to respond accordingly. That's part of what I try to do here, and again, it's been misunderstood, misconstrued by some of you. And again, to think that I'm just an apologist for masturbation, or that all I ever do is talk about wanking, when I don't talk about actual literal wanking at all, or rarely. I've rarely talked about it, and when I have talked about it, it's never been with any kind of explicitness. So, but the fact that this is said about me, or it's been said about me by some, indicates the position that we're in right now. It indicates the state of things, I think. And to respond to Alex Fontana's very interesting article, which I enjoyed reading at Alternative Right, which was posted a couple of days ago, it's not the Jews, and I guess I'm coming in, here I am coming in again, being the Jew defender, or being the perceived Jew defender around here. The article made a lot of references to Jews who played a prominent role, who have played a prominent role in the sexualization of the West. And it's true that Jews have played a prominent role, or a disproportionate role, in the sexualization of the West. That's simply because the intelligentsia has embraced this notion of sexual permissiveness, sexual liberalism, this anti-repression kind of ethos has been embraced completely by the unthinking intelligentsia, who just do, they think they're smart, but they just do what everybody else is doing, what all their friends are doing. And Jews are disproportionately represented among the intelligentsia, right? So I really think it's important not to get sidetracked, and to not to start talking about how this is a Jew thing. The majority of Jews are secular liberals. The Jews who are not secular liberals have very strict sexual morality that they practice. And the Jews who are sexual liberals, they practice these things too. And that's what I don't think gets understood or digested by many people who are somewhat Jew obsessed on the alternative right. It's not just a plot that a bunch of Jews cooked up to really get the goyim, right? To just mess up the goyim supremely by getting him to be into all this perversity and so forth. If it's a weapon that they have used in this way, it's a weapon that has affected them as well. You see Jews just as much as the goyim practicing, doing these kinds of things that nobody was doing in the 50s or before. Or I shouldn't say nobody was doing. Nobody was admitting to having done. It was still highly shameful to do these kinds of things. Fornication, adultery, easy divorce, promiscuity, and so forth. You really think that it's these Jews who are just saying, we're going to preach these kinds of things to the goyim to just fuck the goyim up royally, to get him all sexually addled so we can control him better? No, they preach these things, and then they do these things themselves, and they fuck themselves up too. Okay, so yes, Jews are disproportionately represented, among the sexual liberals, the permissive promoters, the prophets of permissiveness. These people are Jews and non-Jews alike, and it hasn't just been a assault on the goyim by the Jew. But that said, I do believe that there must be an agenda behind the promotion of permissiveness. And I do think part of that agenda is to ensure that we, the sheep, which goyim, I know goyim means sheep, but again, get out of that mode. I invite you to get out of that mode, that Jew-obsessed mode, for a second. We, the sheep, we, the people, are more easily controlled when we don't have self-control. And I think that is part of the point, part of the reason why the elites promote this mentality. Among the elites are Jews and non-Jews, and among the people victimized are Jews and non-Jews, and people of all races, creeds, and colors. It's not all about the Jew and the white man. All right, that's a difference in focus that I take here. So we talk about striking a blow for the counter-revolution in one way or another. To me, the easiest, the best way to strike a blow is to refuse to conform to this norm, to not be permissive, to practice traditionalism, which is to say, to refuse to live the way they want you to live, to decline to take part in the behavior that they promote. That's the best way to fight the power, because you might think that they don't care what little old you does, but they do. They think you're a bad person if you don't promote perversity and permissiveness. And they especially think you're a bad person if you decline to teach your children what they want you to teach your children about sex. This really is the pivot point. This is the centerpiece of the decadence that reigns in our culture today. It isn't at its essence about race. It isn't at its essence about Jews and whites. It isn't at its essence about feminism, although feminism obviously plays a role in the sexual revolution as far as how we're supposed to think about sex roles and so forth. But that's not at the heart of it. The heart of it is the permissiveness that's being taught at every level. It's being used as a kind of psychological bludgeoning against the population. And it's a hard thing to defy, because for one thing, defiance itself is hard. It's hard to go against the grain and to be singled out as an outcast. But it's also hard because obviously sex is appealing, and a permissive lifestyle seems very appealing, especially to young people. But what you have to realize is you are not rebelling by doing these things. You are not striking out on your own by fornicating, cohabiting, etc., and so on, doing all these kinds of things that were at one time frowned upon and were not done by decent people. By doing these things, you are showing yourself to be a perfectly compliant little citizen. So, if you have an interest in fighting back, this is the way to do it. They get you through your groin. They get you through your loins. They get you with this appeal to permissiveness. And you have to throw it back in their faces by refusing this summons, refusing this invitation. Be innocent as doves, but shrewd as serpents, right? And part of being shrewd is being able to fight the enemy on their own terms, with their own terminology, with frankness. And that's what I've been trying to do with my writing, and with what I talk about in these podcasts. I know it's probably only it's only reaching a certain select group of people, and I never have made any claim to being able to change anything. But hopefully, there's a few people who are listening who, maybe a light bulb goes off over your head and you get it. And, one person changing really is something. It really does make a difference. And hopefully this has managed to reach at least maybe a couple people out there. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening to this final Wank session. This is the last of my broadcasts ever to go under that title. And soon I will be unveiling the new book. And I'm sure you're all waiting with bated breath for that. Anyway, thanks for listening, and talk to y'all soon.